Right. 3.5 Human evolution. The diagram below represents the pelvic structure, right? So you highlight that the pelvic structure and the ventral view of the skulls of the three organisms. Now, you highlight the key words, then let's explain the anatomical differences between the pelvic structure of African apes and also humans. Right. So, for African apes, the pelvic structure is long and narrow. Long and narrow. And then for humans, the pelvic structure is short and wide. Short and wide. Right? And they also mentioned ventral view of the skull. So now, let us talk about the difference. African apes and also humans. So for humans, the foramen magnum, which is the opening of the spinal cord. So for the foramen magnum of the African apes is at the back of the skull. The foramen magnum is at the back of the skull, right? And then for humans, the foramen magnum is in front, okay, or is positioned in front of the skull. So it is found in front, okay? Right. That is the anatomical differences between African apes and humans in terms of the pelvic structure and also the skull or the ventral view of the skull. Okay, so now after you highlighting, then you then analyze what is given to you. So let us take a look on the pelvic structures. So we've got 3 of them. It's A, B, C. So as you can see at A, we have a short and wider pelvic structure. All right. And then at B, we also have short and wide. All right. But if you can compare it with A, you can see that at B, the pelvic structure is more short, but it's less wider than A. Right. And then at C, we can see a long and narrow pelvic structure. Right. Then let's take a look on the ventral view of the 3 skulls of the organisms. So now, we do see at X, we do see the less prominent teeth or less prominent canines, and that is for humans. Okay? Humans, less or smaller canines. And then we can also see that the foramen magnum is at the front. Right. And then at Y, we see a large prominent canines. That is for African apes. Right. And also the foramen magnum is at the back of the skull. Right. And then at Z, we can also see less or smaller canines. And then the foramen magnum is positioned at the front of the skull. Right. Then we can therefore answer the questions, which says, write down the letters of the diagrams that represent the skulls of bipedal organisms. That is for 2 marks. So now, those are some of the words, some of the keywords, some of the concepts that you need to understand in order for you to answer these typical questions. So bipedal, bipedalism, that is the ability to walk with 2 legs, and that is our locomotion as humans, because humans are bipedal. We have the ability to walk with 2 legs. So the question is asking you to write down the letters of the diagrams that represent the skulls of humans. That is for 2 marks. And just like we said, the foramen magnum of humans they are positioned at the front. So X and Z. And also we can talk about the canines, smaller canines. So that is for humans. So the correct answer for 3.5.1a, 3.5.1a, that is X and also Z, and that is for 2 marks. Right. Then they will say, okay, the next question, they say, write down the letters or the letter of the diagram that represent the pelvic structure of a quadrupedal organism. What is quadrupedal? That is knuckle walking. Okay, so when you're talking about quadrupedal organisms, you're basically talking about organisms such as monkeys, organisms such as African apes, organisms such as gorillas. They are quadrupedal because they are knuckle walkers. They use 4 limbs for locomotion. So bipedal is for humans, then quadrupedal is for African apes. So in other words, we are looking for the pelvic structure, the letter that represents the pelvic structure of quadrupedal organisms. And remember, for African apes or quadrupedal organisms, the pelvic structure is long and narrow. So C is the correct answer. So we just write C. Then, all right, let me remove this. Then, 2.5.2 is saying, give a reason for your answer to question 3.5.1. Why are you saying C is the pelvic structure of a quadrupedal organism? Because at C we see the diagram that is long and narrow. So the pelvic structure is long and narrow. So you are basically describing how the pelvic structure of a quadrupedal organism is. Okay? And then the following question, which is the last question, is saying to us, describe one other structural difference between a bipedal and a quadrupedal organism. So they are asking you to name, or to describe one other structural difference, okay, besides those differences that we can see on the diagram that is given to us. So we've got so many anatomical differences between a bipedal organism and also a quadrupedal organism, and it's very important to know them. Okay, so we can talk about the shape of the spine. So for quadrupedal organisms, the shape of the spine is C-shaped. So we can say C-shaped spine for what? For quadrupedal organisms. Then for bipedal organisms, the shape of the spine is S-shaped. So you can say S-shaped spine. And that is one other structural difference, okay, between the quadrupedal organism and also the bipedal organism.